Hi, my name is Tyler Laurie. I'm a project engineer with NASA HUNCH. I'm here today to walk you through how to use your new quality kits to help finish, deburr, and take sharp edges off of your hardware before you send it to JSC for final processing. This is your NASA quality kit that we're sending to each school. We're sending with our mentors that visit the schools. In this kit, you will find a few pieces of hardware to help you process. We have a Dremel kit. And this will contain your Dremel, your tips, your holsters, and your power supply. We'll walk through that in a bit. We've got two different types of sandpaper as far as fine and coarse. You've got Scotch-Brite. These are your files, and these are more Dremel tips. In a minute, we'll walk you through how to use the rest of this stuff. So this is your Dremel. This is going to be the tool that you will most likely use the most often to help finish your parts when taking off any burrs or sharp edges. These are your extra Dremel tips. These are rubber stone. Depending on the type of part you have, you might want to choose a different bit size. They come in skinny, fat, wide, round. Just fit the Dremel tip to the part you're looking for depending on what kind of edge it is. If it's an outside edge, if it's an inside edge, you might have different tips you want to use. To use the tip, unlock, twist open, insert the tip, twist tight, release, and now it's on. Once you plug it in, you'll see that you have numbers on the side of it. These are speeds. Once you get started with the Dremel, I'm going to recommend you start on a lower speed. High enough to take the edges and burrs off, but not so high that it's getting away from you, nor is it taking too much of the material away. Be careful with your Dremels. This removes material from your parts. We want to stay within dimensions and tolerances on the drawings. We're only trying to remove edges and burrs. We're not trying to misshapen or take away material enough to get it out of spec for dimension. I'll demonstrate here. So a good medium speed will be good enough to get started. And as you can see, you just take an edge. You want to get a good grip on both the Dremel and the part for control. And then just lightly apply the Dremel to the edge of the part. It might be hard to see in this shot, but you can see that this is your sharp edge, this is a Dremel edge. Again, we're not trying to take off a ton of material, just enough so that it's not sharp and there's no burrs, as opposed to the other sharp edges. So sometimes you want to use the Dremel, sometimes you want to use files. We're giving y'all plenty of different types, lengths, and sizes. We've got flat sides, we've got files with round sides, depending on what kind of edge you're taking off and what kind of part you're using. For instance, a part like a stud, these small little edges that are sharp, to take off the burrs and sharp edges for those, you're probably going to want to stick with a Dremel. The tool, you have smaller tips and you have more control. For a part like a nut, a Dremel can work just fine, but you can also use a file since you have more outside edges to, address. So to use a file similar to the Dremel, be careful when using it. You can take off a lot of material and alter the shape and the dimensions of the part if you're not careful. So again, get a feel for it just like you would the Dremel. Practice a few times before you're using it on flight material. And similar to the Dremel, you're going to want to take off a little at a time. With the file, it's pretty much about getting control and grip, as well as finding a rhythm for filing it down. It's similar to using sandpaper or Scotch-Brite, which we'll get to in a second. And if you ever use that, again, it's several small strokes, lightly taking off that edge. My recommendation for using a file is about a 45-degree to take off the edge, and then about a 30 to 25-degree to file down and soften any sharp tips. Similar to the Dremel, you can see we've taken off that edge. We're not taking off a lot, but now it's not catching. We don't have any burrs, we don't have any sharp edges. Again, be careful not to take off too much material, but it has the same effect. Part of your kit, as I mentioned earlier, Scotch-Brite and Sandpaper. You've got two different types of grit. We have a 600 and a 400. Basically that means the finer the grit, so your 600, used on lighter parts like aluminum. Your higher grits, like your 400, used on steel parts typically, just because the harder material typically requires a more coarse grain, coarse grit sandpaper. These are used to basically take off very small edges, so if it's a very delicate part, like some of your aluminum latches or actuators, if there's a edge next to a critical dimension, something that has a very low tolerance, your plus or minus off your dimension, sometimes we'll take the edge off using sandpaper. And Scotch-Brite is more really to use once you've filed or used your Dremel to take off the edges, pretty much just final smooth and go over those edges. Make sure there's no burrs, make sure it's smooth. Sometimes when you're filing or using a Dremel, you can leave little burrs or edges themselves, which is why, if necessary, we go over with sandpaper or Scotch-Brite. Again, we're just using that nice and lightly, similar to the Dremel and the files, taking off those edges, smoothing down those edges. If there's any sort of catches or any stray machining that affected the outside material, we can lightly sand it down, go over with Scotch-Brite, and leave it nice, smooth, and shiny. As you can see there, looks a little bit cleaner after we've gone over it with the file and the Dremel. Just another way to finish your edges and finish any flat or smooth surfaces if you have any stray machining marks or any sort of edges or burrs being left over. Again, use it lightly and just enough to take off those edges and leave it nice and smooth. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope these little tips and tricks help you. Again, if you need some more instruction on how to use these things, see the user manual for the Dremel, look up some YouTube videos for both using the Dremel and the files, as well as sandpaper and Scotch-Brite. These are tools to help you process these parts. We hope you use more resources to get better at and learn more about using these tools and any other tools that help you finish these parts. Again, this is just a small setup to help and assist you. If you find something else that works better for you, use that. We encourage you to use more resources and learn more all the time. Thank you, and good luck with your parts.